everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Marita Nangkeng is my name. And if you're tuning in, the title of this program is In Hour with Nangla, which is a program that seeks to spotlight activists and heroines or heroes around Cameroon and Africa, doing a lot of work around gender-based violence prevention and response. So today we're super excited to be having with us Professor Abonge, who's a lecturer in the University of Buea. But again, she will be introducing herself to let us know in details who she is. So over to you, Prof.
I am Dr. Christine Abonge, the head of the Department of Women and Gender Studies, and I've been carrying out some work on gender-based violence throughout my academic and professional life.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Prof. I'm super excited having you today, having been my lecturer in the university from 2013 up until my master's degree process. I can attest to the great job you've been doing as an individual and through the institution as well. So that takes us to the next question that seeks to, have a clear understanding. What might have been your motivation? What is it that inspired you to not just study in this area and let go of it, but capacitate others to clearly see what are the challenges women and girls face in this area of gender-based violence? So what was your motivation? What inspired you?
Okay, thank you for that question. My inspiration on working on GBV stems from my academic and professional journey. As with my background on gender and development studies, I began to see gender-based violence not as a series of isolated incidents, but as deeply rooted systemic issues. So uh, I was particularly struck by the data showing how gender-based violence intersects with other forms of inequality, such as economic, racial, and social inequality. And understanding that this is a preventable problem and not an evitable problem is what compelled me to get involved. I was inspired by the possibility of using policy, research, and my services to not just help individuals, but to work towards changing the structures that allow violence to occur. One of my other inspirations is the fact that my inspiration to work in the area of gender-based violence in Cameroon stems from a deep concern about the persistent inequalities and silences surrounding the experiences of women and girls in our communities. So, growing up and working within an educational and social settings in Cameroon, I am a university lecturer. So, I work within an educational institutions. I witnessed how cultural norms, power dynamics, and power imbalances and limited institutional accountability often normalize or conceal acts of violence against women and girls. Um, I was equally moved by the stories of survivors who, despite some of these challenges, found the strength to speak up or seek help. We've carried out workshops on campus, and in some of these workshops, you see how survivors come to participate to tell their stories. So that also motivated me. So you see that despite those challenges, the survivors were able to find strength to speak up and seek help. Their courage made me realize how important it is to create a system and spaces that protect and empower survivors. So that is what motivated me to get involved. First, through awareness. Secondly, advocacy. And later, through research and capacity building efforts that aim to some of the capacity building efforts and awareness raising aim to do what? To try to raise awareness about understanding the drivers of GBV, promote practical policy relevant solutions. So for me, the work that I do on gender-based violence is not just professional. It's deeply personal and tied to my belief in equality, dignity, and social justice for everyone.
Right. That's very solid. This is perfect, and it's super interesting to see how much committed you are to this entire journey. Now, what have you been? I mean, I like that you said it is not just around capacity building alone or teaching alone. But what are some of those interventions which you've put in place? You had highlighted, I mean, the fact that at the level of the university, you conduct workshops. What other additional interventions have you carried out so far or implemented so far, in the same area in an effort to prevent and respond to gender-based violence?
Okay. In terms of my work on gender-based violence prevention and response, I can summarize my area of intervention in three main areas. I have three key areas where I intervene or where my services are rendered. We have awareness, capacity building, and institutional support. Firstly, I engage in community and campus sensitization. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm a university lecturer, so I begin from where I work. So I engage in community and campus sensitization to raise awareness about GBV, challenge harmful gender norms, and promote positive attitudes towards equality and respect. For example, when I talk about campus sensitization, we carry out workshops. We firstly we carry out orientation services. We just received our freshmen, so we carried out orientation of freshmen, and I personally present to the freshmen about sexual harassment on campus, building respectful campuses, respectful and safe campuses, and understanding and preventing sexual harassment on campus. So that is one of the ways that I promote, one of the ways where my services are felt within the university context. And then 16 days of activism is coming up. And as a head of Department of Women and Gender Studies, we organize students and we carry out student advocacy on campus. So since last year, because before the being restricted by funding, we limited our student advocacy on the University of Buea campus. But last year we extended to other campuses because Buea and Molitco is a hub for all many higher institutions of learning. So we extended student advocacy to another university, the Catholic University Institute of the Diocese of Buea. But this year we are planning to go beyond and target many other campuses to carry out student advocacy. Student needs to know about what is sexual harassment, for instance, because that is what is common among them within university, higher education institutions in Cameroon. Sexual harassment is one of the key form of gender-based violence common in the learning environment. So we are trying to ensure that we increase the number of institutions that we are going to target and to carry out student advocacy. In addition to these two activities, in UB, we have at the beginning of every university session or academic session or year, we have an induction process where newly recruited staff are trained and taught about the teaching process and so on. So for the past years too, I've been involved in raising awareness, carrying out workshops on ethical behaviors and sexual harassment. So we raise awareness among staff about sexual harassment, how to respect students, how to ensure that our campuses are safe for learning and teaching.
Perfect. Perfect. This is super amazing. Like, always, as new as people can be, as students can be on the campus, they could be a lot more vulnerable to gender-based violence. And I'm very excited to see how you leverage these entry points from the freshmen getting into the university up until the lecturers starting off of the new academic year. These are really, really good entry points, and letting people know about their rights from the onset, and also knowing where they can go to seek support, and how perhaps existing policies within the university milieu could support them. I mean, it's really, really interesting because sometimes we say we should raise our voices or report incidents of gender-based violence, but people really don't even know what gender-based violence literally is. Exactly. So
Yes.
What would be some of the key content, some of the key highlights of these capacity building sessions you provide both to lecturers and to students? Will you go deep into the different types of gender-based violence? What does this curriculum look like?
The content, or we lay a lot of emphasis on what sexual harassment is, because the assumption is, like you mentioned earlier, many people don't even know what gender-based violence is. So we start by raising our awareness and letting students, including staff, know what sexual harassment is. And when you tell them, for instance, during orientation, I tell students what sexual harassment is, any unwelcome or unwanted acts of a sexual nature. Then you give them types. If somebody touches you, and you are not comfortable, you need to tell your harasser to stop, because the harasser may not know that they are committing an offense. So if you tell them to stop and they persist, then it is harassment. But when you don't tell them to stop, they wouldn't know that you are not comfortable, and they might continue doing it. So if you're not comfortable with it, tell the harasser to stop. So we raise students awareness about what sexual harassment is all about, and trying to give them the power that you have the right to tell whoever is manipulating you and so on, to stop doing what they are doing because you are not comfortable. And then we make them understand that sexual harassment, people think they think that you can touch a student, you can use a student and go away with it. But we make them know that it is a crime, and so you have the right to come and report. And we tell them, inform them, if you are sexually harassed, even on campus and out of campus, these are the places where you report to. Come to this room 113, which is my office. See the vice dean in charge of students and student affairs and complain there. See the counseling service. The university also go. We will now put the what it takes. Look at the evidence, and then know where to take you or where to direct you to. Now, this is with students, even with staff and colleagues. Also need to know that doing this, or what sexual harassment is all about. If you touch a student, if you invite a student to your home, and you promise a student that you give them marks if they accompany you home, or if they have any sexual activity with you, that is gender-based violence, and it is sexual harassment. At times, teachers will tell you that the students too are harassers, and we draw their attention to the fact that they have responsibility over the students. And because you have responsibility over the student, you cannot tell me that the students harass you. So you have a responsibility over the students and are bound to protect them. Then we also try to inform the students. You make yourselves, at times, students make themselves vulnerable to harassment. So we raise awareness by students should ensure that if you are given an assignment, be in the right place at the right time, do your assignment and submit it. Because when you don't do your assignment, you don't attend lectures, and there is a problem, you make yourself vulnerable because you have to start running after your teacher. And then the teacher now takes the upper hand to start asking you for services that are unwarranted.
Right. Agreed. Agreed. And this is very solid. This is laying the solid foundation from the onset and having it straight up, knowing where to seek services and why you should seek those services. This is super cool. This is very, very interesting and very important to know. I mean, I remember you saying this reminds me of the days when we still started with the preliminary courses on gender-based violence, and distinguishing the definitions of these different types of gender-based violence was always a very difficult thing. So just digressing just a little bit for anybody, because you've spoken about something that's very key, and I'm thinking that for anybody out there who's listening or who will be listening to this video, it would be an area of a point of learning to quite a lot of people. So I just wanted us maybe to brush again, just very briefly, around the different types of gender-based violence. If we are looking at gender-based violence, what should they be looking for or looking out for in addition to sexual violence, which you had already highlighted? I like that you said it could be verbal and it could be physical as well. So maybe let's look into other GBV types in addition to sexual violence.
Thank you for that question. Considering that I work with the university or within the university community, from my experience working on gender-based violence issues in Cameroon, the most prevalent forms that I have observed cut across physical, sexual, psychological, and socioeconomic violence, though they often overlap and reinforce one another. Now, one of the most common is sexual harassment, like I mentioned, particularly in educational and workplace setting, because sexual harassment is common, is not only limited to educational settings, it is also common in workplace or work environments. So, and this sexual harassment include unwanted advances, sexual coercion, and the abuse of authority and academic power. Talked about power dynamics coming into play. And with sexual harassment, we also have what we call sex for grades. What we in our normal student parlance, you hear them talk about sexually transmitted marks. So
Max,
that
right.
has to do with, uh, but we also have intimate partner violence, which is widespread in Cameroon. Domestic violence. These are other forms of gender-based violence, ranging from physical assault to emotional and economic control within relationships. Then we have cultural norms that tolerate male dominance or discourage women from reporting abuse, tend to perpetuate domestic and intimate partner violence. Recently, we have in Cameroon, all of these are common, but we have femicides. And femicide has to do with the killing of women because of their gender or in the context of GBV or domestic violence. This is a growing phenomenon in Cameroon. And the country has recorded about 67 cases of femicide in 2024 compared to 56 cases in 2023. This gives us an increase of about 23%, indicating that femicide is a serious issue, a serious form of GBV in Cameroon that needs to be addressed. In some communities, we also have harmful traditional practices such as early and forced marriages. These are also forms, examples of gender-based violence. So we have these practices that are promoted by our culture, harmful traditional practices such as early and forced marriages, widowhood rights, female genital mutilation, which still persist and contribute to gender-based harm. All of these are examples and forms of gender-based violence. So overall, we see that, as I mentioned earlier, these forms of gender-based violence are interconnected and rooted in gender inequality and sustained by social silence and weak institutional responses. So my work seeks to address these patterns by promoting awareness, like I mentioned at the beginning. My work is in three areas: raising awareness, capacity building, and providing institutional support. So all that I do seeks to address these patterns by promoting awareness, strengthening accountability systems, and supporting survivors' access to justice and protection.
Right. Great. So if you're out there listening to us right away, Prof has spelled out the different types of gender-based violence, which are very prevalent in our Cameroonian context, and she has gone ahead to briefly define them in a way that you clearly can understand, right? And that's very useful. That's super helpful. So, Prof, what would you say are your targeted populations? Because I know that you've been involved in a range of activities in campus, out of campus, and out of Cameroon as well. So, with your services, which you've clearly highlighted, who will you say is or are your targeted population?
Um, when we talk about gender-based violence in Cameroon, my target population and emphasis is mainly on young women and girls, especially those in schools, universities, and communities, because they are often the most affected by different forms of violence, from harassment and abuse to discrimination. But this does not mean that that is our only target. Our focus is not only limited to women and girls alone. We also engage men and boys because they are a very important part in the solution. So we believe that meaningful change happens when everyone understands the issue and takes responsibility for creating safe or safer spaces. So we gender-based violence occurs in our homes, in schools, in the workplace, and in our community. So we target everybody and members of these spaces, including women, men, and even other institutions, because in part of my work has been working with faith-based and religious leaders. So those are some of the people we target. So we also work closely with teachers, like I mentioned earlier. During the induction process, we work with teachers, university authorities, community leaders, and some of the service providers, such as CSOs. I can say that our approach of targeting, given that we've listed everybody, considering that gender-based violence occurs in almost all spaces within the community, I can say that our approach of targeting is comprehensive and inclusive.
Yes, for real it is. And I agree with you on that because a few days ago I had this conversation with a colleague within the CSO. I had seen their flyer and continually we continue to project just men as perpetrators of gender-based violence. And I like that you highlighted the fact that men make up a part of the solution. And I was telling her that from the angle of behavioral change, we need to start recognizing men as part of the solution because when we do education, information, education, and communication materials, and we continually project men as the perpetrators, we hardly
As a
project them
problem.
as part of the solution. So we need to start working on our communication strategies to also continually use more men as activists. And I like that right at the department in the Students Association, you people always supported more boys or men to lead these associations, put more emphasis on their voices, to put them as a front line leaders, to raise their voices in advocacy against gender-based violence. So for real, it is a comprehensive approach because I know you also highlighted the fact that gender-based violence leans a lot on power dynamics, and the holders of this power are the religious and traditional leaders, which are the key groups that you get to work with. And that to me is very important and clearly defines what a comprehensive approach would mean, especially following the ecological model from society, from the individual, the family, the community, and the society at large. So, Prof, this looks like a lot of work you're doing on a daily basis without resting. What are some of your challenges that you're faced with carrying out all of these tasks on a daily? I see you on the move all the time.
Um, Actually, there is no work without challenges. So I must admit that working in the area of gender-based violence prevention and response has been both rewarding and challenging. And one of the major challenges I encounter is the culture of silence and stigma surrounding GBV. Many survivors are afraid. Many survivors are afraid to report incidents because they fear being blamed, they fear being disbelieved or being socially ostracized. This makes it difficult to get accurate data or to ensure that survivors receive timely support. Another significant challenge is limited institutional commitment and resources. In some settings, GBV is still not treated as a priority. Like I mentioned earlier, people trivialize, generally, people trivialize issues about gender and particularly issues on GBV. And that's why you will see that there is the prevalence of the blaming syndrome, because people see it as minimal and not serious. So another significant challenge is a limited security, and there are gaps in funding. People need the resources and the funding to actually carry out the research to demonstrate. We are struggling to carry out a study in higher education institutions in Cameroon to ascertain the prevalence of sexual harassment on university campuses. Often we based in Cameroon, so that when we are that will ascertain our discussions in terms of the prevalence. We'll be able to give concrete statistics and data about the prevalence of sexual harassment in higher educational institutions in Cameroon. But the funding is limiting, that we are still struggling to source funding to carry that out. So we also have one of the challenges, cultural and social norms that pose as a challenge, especially when addressing issues like sexual harassment or intimate partner violence that are often normalized People think that it is normal for a spouse to beat the wife, or a husband to beat the wife, because they see the cultural norms that see the man as dominant and the wife as subordinate. Claim they think that that gives the man power to control the wife and to correct the wife. But these are all cultural norms. So it's difficult to change some of these norms. So such cultural norms pose challenges, especially when addressing issues on sexual harassment or intimate partner violence that are often normalized or justified as private matters. So changing the mindsets require time, consistent engagement, and culturally sensitive approaches. Additionally, coordination among stakeholders such as universities, NGOs, and health services can be, at times, it's weak, making it difficult to provide a holistic response to survivors. There is one other key challenge that I experienced personally, and it is recent. And this is has to do with what I call extractive engagement. Most often, stakeholders use survivors of violence as sources of information and data. They use this to build their statistics, to support their reports and funding proposals. And once this is achieved, when they get their data, they get their information, they get their maybe their videos and so on, the next thing is that the survivors are left without any follow-up or support. And this is not fair. You use the survivors, you get information from them to build your report, to build your statistics for your funding opportunity, and then you abandon. That is a very serious issue. So the survivors experiences are extracted and used to generate statistics and stories for or visibility for institutions or projects, but the survivors themselves do not benefit in any tangible or sustainable way. It is a problem. Maybe the stakeholders don't see it as a problem, but it is a problem. So I am pleading and pledging that GBV stakeholders need to strive to be ethical in their approach and move beyond data extraction from survivors to what? Survivor inclusion, healing, and process. Because when you talk with a survivor, you don't just leave them and go because you've gotten the information that you want. You need to keep on working and supporting the survivor. So despite these challenges, I see them as opportunities to strengthen systems, build partnerships, and continue pushing for accountability and change. Maybe some of the challenges that I have raised, especially the last one, people may not see it as an issue for concern, but it is a very serious issue that stakeholders need to look into.
Yes, Prof, and I agree. I really do agree that that's a big concern because I know that in your awareness raising exercises, one of the key messages that goes out is often that survivors should break the silence and seek justice. And when you look at gender based violence case management, one of its core principles is around do no harm. And when you're looking at the survival centered approach in gender based violence case management, the sole intention is to be able to provide holistic services that improve the well being of the survivor. Much as you're not a
That's
researcher, and even if you are a researcher, you're not supposed to exploit the survivor. You're not supposed to get information because from the survivor and go because you will tarnish the work activists have been doing for a very long time. If you let a survivor put out their information to you, the information from the onset needs to be very clear while you obtain informed consent. Why are you obtaining that information? What are you supposed to use that information for? How beneficial will it be to the survivor? And how will that information you've collected
the
put the
survivor.
survivor at risk? So that is why we call it informed consent because this information is supposed to be put out to the survivor. And there is a package in GBV response called active or passive referrals. Even if you collect information and you're unable to provide needed services, you can refer that survivor to the next competent service provider who can provide those services or who can refer again that survivor to another competent service provider. There are survivors that go through sometimes 4 or 5 service providers before ever getting holistic support. And this also speaks as to why many institutions have what is called the one-stop shop center. I think CBS, CBC started is something like that at Mutengene, but I still don't know if it's ongoing. But that level of exploitation of survivors is unacceptable. It is unacceptable because this would even hinder many other survivors from opening up, from speaking up, which stands as one of the main challenges to your work you do. Because if a survivor comes to tell another survivor or narrate their stories as to how they got information from them and they got no services in return, no survivor will speak up again because they're being exploited. So if you're one of those organizations out there or institutions out there doing this, please, we need to curb that. We need to work on putting that to an end. And Prof, like you mentioned, statistics always go a long way. There is power in data. So if there is any institution that's out there listening to this video or watching this video right now, if you're looking at an institution that can partner or collaborate with you or that you can fund to support you in the entire data collection process, or you can collaborate with in research around gender-based violence in Cameroon generally, Prof. Abonge is right here to the rescue. You can always reach out to her and you all can collaborate to get this data that can inform our policies. So, Prof, just to digress a little bit, I feel like Cameroon is one of those countries that has ratified just a lot of policies around gender-based violence prevention. Yet, it may seem as though our implementation of those policies is somewhat limiting. What are your thoughts around this?
In terms of the legal frameworks, we have several of those, and some of these conventions that Cameroon has ratified and therefore is a member, and these conventions are applicable in our context. We have, for instance, the CEDAW Convention, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, that informs some of the activities and resistance of gender-based violence. We also have the NDS 30, National Development Strategy 2030, where in some areas they talk about promoting gender equality, and we know that gender-based violence is one of those issues that stem as a result of the absence of gender equality. And we have the Cameroon Human Rights Commission. They are also very instrumental in promoting human rights in general and addressing issues of gender-based violence. We have one of the members of the commission who is the pioneer head of Department of Women and Gender Studies, Professor Joyce Endele. They do a lot of work, and she always reports to us, gives us examples on how and what they do. They even have a toll-free number that people can call when you witness or observe gender-based violence around your neighborhood.
So gender-based violence is everyone's business. And if we're able to get to that point where even a neighbor can be able to disclose an incident, then it will be very helpful. When you look at the USA, for instance, if there is a case of violence in the home, even the neighbor is able to report. And I think I cannot remember the portion in Cameroon's penal code, particularly. I think it urges people not to be bystanders in with regards to gender-based violence. If you do not report, the law looks at you as an accomplice to the incident. Yeah. So, probably this is a lot of work you're doing, and I really do applaud you for all you do. And again, I wanted to find out what is it that keeps you going amidst these challenges? What makes you stay buoyant? What are some of those success stories that makes you encouraged, that keeps you going regardless of some of these challenges? What is it that what are some of those results that you've gotten that every other time pushes you further to keep up with this area of work?
Actually, I can say that success in the area of GBV work is difficult to measure, because when you deal with people, you raise awareness, you leave them and you go. It is actually really difficult to measure. But I must admit that over the years, I've been fortunate to record some meaningful success based on my own evaluation. And through student advocacy, one of the major achievements has been building greater awareness and openness. Through student advocacy, we raise awareness. So students and the university community tend to be knowledgeable about what it is, how to prevent it, what to do, where to go to, and so on. I see that as a success story. So, as I mentioned, building greater on community settings through sensitization sessions, training workshops, and orientation programs. Um, Another success has been supporting institutions to strengthen their prevention and response mechanisms. I have worked, like I mentioned, that I work with civil society organizations. I've been able to develop GBV guides for some civil society organizations. I've been able to train members of that on and capacity building that has led to the establishment of gender desks. We have gender desks at the National Security in Buea, and I was one of those who participated in training and setting up the gender desk. So I see that as a success because the members of the gender desks now, they are able to handle complaints thanks to the training that we gave them. So I also take pride in building capacity of chiefs. I mentioned about we extending to the community. So I've been involved in building capacity of chiefs, traditional rulers, and religious and faith-based leaders on forms of GBV who now lead awareness campaigns. Because during my training with faith, faith-based and religious leaders, one of the recommendations I made is in your within when you are giving a sermon, you can take that, especially during weddings. You can use that as an opportunity to talk about intimate partner abuse. So we advise them to use particular, maybe their sermons during particular events to bring in issues about gender-based violence. So I see that as a success. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it will be difficult for me to measure my success, but I think that through these activities, I think that some of these stakeholders will be able to implement some of the things that they learn through capacity building and training.
Right. I mean, thank you, Prof. Because I mean, when you talk about training of these community leaders, that should be a very big milestone, basically. Because in my career, working as a social worker and a project lead, one of our key activities with funding from UNTF was always training of these religious leaders. And this used to be the most difficult set of people to train and to make them see why. And using a
Yeah, they
proxy,
are.
like yeah, like the weddings is a big thing because many times when you sit, I was discussing this with a friend and I was saying that I'm tired of sitting in weddings where they we preach all the time about being the virtuous woman, the Proverbs 31 woman. That's a very good thing to do, but what about we
Yeah,
tell the men?
at time one of the
Yeah,
challenges working with religious leaders, they want to interpret biblical texts to support women's subordination and submission and so on. But when when you try to let them see, because you don't only use one particular section of the Bible to talk about the women submitting and so on. There are other areas of the Bible that will contradict or give more meaning, and that will be different from this particular context that you are talking about submission and so on.
exactly. So I mean, just in support of what you just mentioned, we were looking at what about you tell the men as well that the same Bible says the man should be the head of the home, like Christ was the head of the church. So if Christ was the
Of
head of the church, he was very compassionate. He was very nice with his leadership
loving, loved
style.
church, sacrificed for his
Exactly.
church.
Yes. So how about they love their women that way? If you love your women that way, submission will come just
You sacrifice
normally.
and you will not assault. Exactly. If you love your wife, you will not assault her.
Exactly. Exactly. So we are looking
Uh,
forward.
uh,
Yeah.
I I just wanted to add to one of the successes that my success story. This is through research because I was able to carry out research on the prevalence of GBV in the health sector, sponsored by an international NGO, Align, and one local NGO, the Community Initiative for Development. So this is not an advert anyway. So we, through research too, we carry out work that we document experiences, statistics, and data on GBV. And this can inform advocacy too. So this is, I see that too as one of my success areas.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. I mean, working to the point of being able to get those consultancies and get funding, it speaks to the impact of the work you're doing. And I remember that not long ago, you highlighted the relevance of having statistics and having information and verifiable data in this whole thing. And this is exactly it. This is exactly it. So we need to keep digging in that area. We need those fundings coming through. We need those partnerships and collaborations also coming through, you know. Yeah, we need them coming through. Um, Prof, I mean, we're getting really, really closer to winding down on this, but I wanted to say that you're doing a lot of work, not just as a lecturer in the university, but also touching base with the community and, I mean, being really, really at the roots of these issues and contributing so, so powerfully towards eradicating or at least mitigating the prevalence of gender-based violence. So, if there is a survivor listening to you from the other side of the screen, and maybe a policymaker listening to you, what advice or what advocacy statement will you put out there for them?
I cannot end this session without addressing survivors of GBV and the wider public. So, the first thing I have to say to every survivor listening, please remember that what happened to you is not your fault. You deserve to be heard, supported, and to live free from fear and harm. Seeking help is not a sign of weakness, but an act of courage and self-worth. So if you have suffered any form of gender-based violence, please speak up because we are here for you. Nobody has the right to abuse you. Uh, uh, Secondly, there are services, organizations, and individuals out there that are committed to working with you on your journey to healing and justice. In the Cameroonian context, we have Prof, women empowerment centers that are locally situated. We have our local churches. We have many civil society organizations. We have the Cameroon Human Rights Commission. All of these and many others, and even individuals are out there and ready to hear you, ready to support you, and ready to help you. So please don't be quiet. Speak out. If you don't speak out, we will not know that you are suffering and you will not be able to get help. So please speak out. And to the public in general, I would emphasize that the prevention of gender-based violence is a collective responsibility. We are all involved. It is a collective responsibility. Each of us has a role to play. Men, women, boys, girls, we all have a role to play, including our religious leaders, our traditional rulers. All of us have a role to play. And what is the role that we each play? By challenging harmful norms, speaking out against abuse, and supporting survivors with empathy and respect. We need to create a culture of zero tolerance towards GBV. And this requires commitment. We need to be committed that we need to end GBV in all its forms within our community, within our families, within our institutions, and among policymakers. So together, I want to say that together we can build a society where safety, dignity, and equality are guaranteed for all, and where every individual, regardless of gender, has the opportunity to thrive free of violence, free of fear, and free of discrimination. So that is my take-home message to everybody who is listening to me and who is watching me. be you a survivor or the public or a policymaker or a civil society organization. Thank you.
Perfect. Perfect. That's a very powerful call to action right there. And we're hopeful that people listening to this are able to drive this message back home and, see themselves as part of the change that we all seek, even if it means speaking against gender-based violence or calling a perpetrator out. So thank you very much, Prof. So any final words from your part?
My final word will just go to emphasize on the efforts that we should all be committed, calling on every hand on deck to fight against gender-based violence. Because when you look at some of the cultural norms and so on, they are all promoted by us. So to end this, we need to also come out and denounce all these practices. So I am inviting everybody, I am inviting our communities, family members, and so on, that everyone should put their hand on deck so that collectively we should fight against gender-based violence in our families, in our schools, in our communities, and make these areas safe for members of these communities.
Thank you so much, Prof. Ending gender-based violence is everyone's business. Thank you so much, Prof, for finding time to be a part of this program or today's session. It's been very inspiring and so encouraging listening to you share your experience and your work as well. If you have been following up until this moment, you've been listening to Professor Abonge and myself, Marita Nankeng. We thank you so much for following along with us. And up until this moment, thank you again. And it's a bye bye from our angle. Bye.
Thank you.